Myers-Briggs or whatever else. You always end up with the same personality type. Dominant, expressive personality. Even silly things like horoscope. I'm a Scorpio. I go to a Chinese restaurant. I'm under the sign of the dragon. I mean, everything just reinforces this. Well, when you're that type of personality naturally, but it feels shaky to be who you are, and you get this reinforced message of don't take risk, don't step out because it's inevitably going to lead to loss. Well, this part of you gets tremendously frustrated, this part that wants to step out and be expressive. And like a beach ball getting shoved under the water, eventually it's going to find a place to pop out. And for me, the places that it always popped out was in a sense of undermining everything. Now, my job was to be safe, and so I would never do it overtly, but I became really good at subtle sabotage, primarily of myself. Let me give you a couple examples of how this works out. And you've probably got kids like this in your world, maybe in your own family, but when you're one of these kids that likes ideas and spends a lot of time exploring stuff, they pull you out of classes for like advanced reading classes when you're younger, and then when you get older, they put you in the quote-unquote gifted classes. Now, I've never been that smart, but, they kind of pull you out for that type of stuff. Well, that's great in that it recognizes certain things about certain kids, but for me, it was also another way that reinforced, hey, you're different. You're stepping out. And that doesn't feel safe. And so what I would do was I would just find ways to squander opportunities, to waste the advantages that are given, to waste the opportunities that were given in things like gifted courses or accelerated ventures. Some of you are feeling a little queasy right now because maybe you see your son or daughter doing that same type of thing. Maybe you were that kid too. Let me give you a snapshot of what that looked like when I was in high school. I had a great teacher, a social studies teacher. She since passed. Her name was Mary Ann Haynes. And she had my number. She knew it. And one day in the middle class, I still kind of can't believe she did this. I'm glad she did, but I can't believe she did it. And I could see her with her face beet red and the veins sticking out of her neck. You should be the class valedictorian, and you away every opportunity you're given. Now, being who I was, I have several thoughts going on simultaneously. Number one is she's right. Number two, I'm never going to admit that. And number three, I'm not going to overtly respond, but, in my own subtle ways, and, I'm going to respond basically with the middle finger of Christian charity. And so, in response, I just checked farther and farther out. Didn't do the work, didn't do the opportunities, made sure that I was funny and connected, but never used any of the natural gifts or the opportunities that were given. My response was just to pull farther and farther away. Now, in terms of spirituality, that was something I always read a lot about too and thought about. Read a lot of different philosophy and New Age thought, even though we wouldn't put that name on it at the time. A lot of alternative ways of viewing the world. But in the small town I grew up in, there were not lots of opportunities to explore different ways of viewing the world. We didn't have a mosque. We didn't have a synagogue. We didn't have the kind of things that we have here in Columbia. We had churches. And the kind of churches that I experienced were not the type of places that were particularly open to questions or different types of thought. And my experience with them was tremendously limited. I say I didn't go to church as a kid because I really didn't. I got drug in 3 times a year: Easter, Christmas, and Boy Scout Sunday. Boy Scouts, there's another great opportunity for a kid like me to look good on the outside, do a few things that make you socially acceptable. It's also the place where I learned how to drink with a lot of the other Boy Scouts. When you lead a double life and you learn how to live in a duality, these things come naturally. But in terms of spirituality, one of my early defining experiences, I remember being 18 and sitting in the back of Wesley United Methodist Church on a Christmas Eve service in 1983. And I'm sitting in the back of the service, and it's a great traditional Christmas Eve service. The beautiful greenery, the traditional songs. We've all got the little white candle with the paper collar on it. Getting ready to do the candlelight service, which are beautiful. And I remember sitting in the back of that auditorium and feeling really bad. Bad because I felt like I was crashing their party. I couldn't believe that anyone with any intellectual integrity could believe any of this stuff that they were talking about in church. A virgin birth, God coming to earth, blah-de-blah. No, come on. But I didn't feel smug or superior. I felt bad. Because it's like, this is good. You've got your place in the world. You've kind of created it. And I just kind of feel like an interloper, a gate crasher. And so I made my mind up right there that, even my 3 times a year at that point was done. I am not walking back into another one of these places. Because I don't fit here. I don't believe what they're saying. And so, for me, it felt like a more honorable decision just to say, enough, I'm out. Now, there was an opportunity for a do-over right there, but instead I took a detour. A do-over possibility might have been to push a little bit and ask some questions, or maybe find somebody that you could trust to talk about some of these things. Another do-over opportunity might have been if people had been in a posture to be open to a kid that might have lots of questions and might be looking for someone to wrestle with these questions with him. But for whatever combination of reasons that was not available, I didn't take that do-over, and instead I took a detour off into other paths. So, this idea of who you are is not necessarily acceptable or safe. You don't want to risk any loss, and yet you got this thing in you that is growing in its amount of resentment because it has no place to be expressed. There's no place it feels like it's okay to be who you are. Well, let me go a little farther and tell you how that played out for me professionally. I went to school pursuing a journalism degree. Radio, television was my emphasis, and I went to K-State. And I lived half a block off campus, and KSDB was the call letters of both the student radio station and the student television station. And I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week. I'd walk over to campus, and I would get both stations going in the morning. Almost every morning I'd be in there turning on all the machinery, getting the news off the wire, writing the news copy, getting ready to often do the news report, programming the morning show, the morning jazz show, getting all this stuff ready to go because I loved it. I loved doing this stuff. I got a charge out of all of it. I got up happy, looking forward to do it. I would normally put in 3 hours of work before I ever went to my first class. In between classes, I'd go back to the stations to do whatever needed to be done, and then after classes, I would go back in and work some more because I just loved the work. It meant something in me. It connected with the things that I love personally, and it just felt like the right place to be. And I loved doing all of that up and until the last semester of my senior year in college, when I started thinking. Now, nobody else that I grew up around did this kind of stuff. All the guys I grew up around took, quote-unquote, normal type of jobs. Most of them did what their dads did, worked for the railroad or, at the state hospital, at the ammunition plant, which were the 3 major employers there in Parsons. That's what you did. And I started thinking, this is different. And different doesn't feel okay for me because it doesn't feel safe. And different feels risky, and risk equals loss. So, I should probably go over to the sales side. Because, that's what my dad did. My dad was a salesman his entire life, actually, until he retired last year. That ground's already been plowed. That feels safe. I should do that. And so I did. I switched over to the sales side. And selling is a great profession. It's noble, and it's necessary, and guys like my dad are great at it. It fits who they are. It did not fit who I was.